Blogspot Direbane. I'm filming today in my office instead of in my garage. Sound is noisy, so you get garage quality in an office. I was inspired by Questing Beast's reading of the original Gary Gygax's Dungeon Master's Guide to make a video about something that's near and dear to my heart, which is Arduin. And this is going to be a pretty informal. If there's any links that can illuminate some of the things I touch on, I'll include them in the About section. Most people, when they talk about Arduin is discussed for its rules variations. What I would like to talk about is the setting of Arduin in a series of brief videos, because I don't believe that that really gets talked about to the extent that the rules variations do. But first, I would like to talk about, and at least touch on, the rules of Arduin and how it intersected with my D&D game when I started playing Dungeons & Dragons. So I started in the winter between 77 and 78, during winter break of my 8th grade year. My friend Dr. John, PhD, got the Holmes Basic set. And this is what we started with, the Blue Book. It had levels 1st through 3rd for Fighter, Mage, Cleric, and Thief. And you could play Halfling, Human, Elf, or Dwarf. And that carried us through a lot of D&D. We used Dungeon Geomorphs and Monster and Treasure assortments, and we played all the time. And we started to get into the modules, so we started playing In Search of the Unknown and Village of Hamlet, and started to branch out into Judges Guild, getting the City-State of the Invincible Overlord. Probably late summer of 1978, somebody got themselves a player's handbook, which had additional races, additional classes, and levels up through above 3. And the problem is we didn't have a Dungeon Master's Guide, and we didn't have the attack matrices or the saving throw matrices for those higher levels. So what we did is, by this time we'd been also, as I mentioned, we'd been using Judges Guild. Judges Guild had this nice book called Ready Ref Sheets, and inside it has your attack matrices and saving throw matrices from the original D&D and from Greyhawk for levels up through 16 and 17. And the only thing is, with the attacks, we had to extrapolate, because this used the old no armor as AC 9, and the player's handbook, of course, used no armor as AC 10. During that time, right about probably the beginning of my freshman year of high school, my friend Space and Jason shows up at our game, and he's got this crazy book and he wants to play a techno. And so this is these other copies of books I accumulated in the last 15 years. My originals are battered, but these 3 here are my original that I gamed with Arduin copies, and that's why you can see they're just falling apart. I didn't get mine until a year after Jason did. So, but he shows up and he wants to play a techno, and we couldn't believe this, and we start using the critical hit tables. My brother, I think, started playing a barbarian first. He was our first barbarian. It became an aspect of our Dungeons & Dragons playing. It just blew out the idea of any simple medieval sword and sorcery genre. So from a very early time, we brought in science fiction, pulp fiction, ancient dinosaurs, everything. And we didn't settle with just medieval. And at the time also, Judges Guild setting had an aspect of science fiction. Dave Hargrave now, he came out with this first, the Arduin Grimoire. And at the same time, he started also submitting articles to Alarms and Excursions, which is an amateur press publication. These are Hargrave's submissions to Alarms and Excursions from probably about 1977 until I think 81 or 82. There's about 100 pages of submissions here that Dave sent into the publication, and most of these ended up in later grimoires. But it was nice that there was this communication going on where authors could put ideas out on Alarms and Excursions, and get comments back from other gamers. I grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area, East Bay, and we may have gotten exposed early on to Dave Hargrave because his gaming company, Multiversal Trading Company, was located in Concord, which is about 20 minutes north of where I am in Pleasanton, California. Maybe the West Coast had a weird style of D&D, but here we were. I didn't get my copies of the Arduin Grimoires until 1979, and I was ecstatic. We had a local game store that opened up, Pleasanton Hobbies. Because they were a new game store and they wanted to encourage business, they would basically get in whatever we wanted them to get in. And that's how I was able to get my first copies of the Arduin Grimoire. They weren't organized very well. So what I did in my game is I used little paper clips to find the sections I needed to refer to most. And then I had a little paperclip key to find out where was everything in each book, because these were kind of very similar to the supplements for original Dungeons and Dragons in that each book had sections on classes, spells, monsters, magic items, so they weren't unified. So the other thing I did is I typed up unified indexes for spells and magic items and things like that covered the material that was in all three of the books, and that was very useful. I didn't get, at the time, any additional Arduin Grimoires. I just used the trilogy. And the reason is because the trilogy was based around the original Dungeons and Dragons rules, so while there were some differences, you could still use them pretty much as is with Dungeons and Dragons rules. What happened after this, Hargrave sold the company to Jim Mathis of Grimoire Games, or sold the rights to Arduin. He ended up publishing a introductory set called the Arduin Adventure, which had different combat rules, basically. A little backstory for Dave Hargrave. He was a combat photographer in the Vietnam War and did multiple tours. And so one of the perspectives that he brought to the game is he wanted to make combat more realistic. And so he dealt more with than regular D&D of where your shield would protect you and where your shield wouldn't protect you. How do people parry attacks or alternative ways of defending against attacks other than just your armor. And so that was one thing that he felt was very important. And when he came out with the Arduin Adventure, he really kind of broke away from the D&D rule. Dave Hargrave always said his game was complete in itself. Play it all by itself. I've never done that. I've always played it in conjunction with Dungeons and Dragons. So at any rate, once Arduin Adventure came out, the subsequent Grimoires base their stats around the Arduin Adventure game system. Although, as Dave Hargrave says, it's not the numbers that matter, it's the ideas. So from his perspective, you could take information from any of the Grimoires and translate them to any of the different games. I just played D&D. That's all I played. Dave Hargrave went through some litigation over zoning in the city of Concord. The city of Concord wanted to redevelop the block that Dave Hargrave's store, the Multiversal Trading Company, was located on. And he ended up having a lot of litigation. He didn't win. He ended up, in later years, basically selling Arduin out of his apartment. You can go to the street, Salvio Street in Concord, and you can find the block where it was, but the address actually no longer exists anymore. Dave Hargrave fell in hard financial times and was also writing material for Call of Cthulhu, in addition to Arduin material, and selling what he could in conjunction with Jim Mathis, but the money was very tight, and he kind of had stopped publishing any grimoires. And so Ben and Mary Easel, and I hope I'm pronouncing their name right, from Dragon Tree Press went out to visit with Dave and encourage him to publish more grimoires. These are Delos books, which were Mary and Ben's setting, which they intersected with another aspect of Arduin, is that it's set in a multiverse of thousands or potentially an infinite number of alternative universes. Mary and Ben did Delos. They produced the 5 later grimoires: The Lost Grimoire, Dark Dreams, House of the Rising Sun, Shadowlands, and Winds of Change, which were all set around this Arduin adventure system. I didn't find any of the later ones, but my friend Space and Jason did, and so I actually have a little bit of, these are my bootlegs of what I thought was useful. These later books that I've got here, these are not the original, well, some of these are original purchases, but these here are books that I've gotten in the last 15 years or so. My copies, trashed. They've been played hard. What happened is Dave Hargrave passed away in 1988, and he left unfinished his magnum opus, which was to be this full game, not an introductory game like Arduin Adventure, but really a full game called Arduin Bloody Arduin. What came out of that is the complete Arduin. So Grimoire Games did to get this published out. This is the second volume. There's actually 2 books, 3. There's also a spell book called The Black Grimoire. I only have book 2. That's a Star Mage on the cover. These are were completed by Mark Scheinert, and they pull in a lot of the words from the grimoires. So Mark calls himself the editor of this book, not the writer. He still says it's written by Dave Hargrave because he used Dave Hargrave's words in it. Side note, Mark Scheinert is the game scheduling supervisor for DungeonCon. So if you ever go down to DungeonCon, you might run into Mark Scheinert, and he knows a lot about Arduin, and he gamed in it for a long time, and he spent a lot of time working on this complete Arduin. As time went on, Jim Mathis sold Arduin to a company called Emperor's Choice Games, and that occurred, I believe, around 1998, and there ended up being litigation that Emperor's Choice owned the trademark to Arduin. Because as I mentioned, Dragon Tree Press was publishing later grimoires, and there was a dispute over who owned the rights to that. And so they reached a settlement where Dragon Tree was allowed to sell what they had done. They had to put a little sticker on the back. I believe both companies were publishing digest-sized books. So you'll notice whenever anything's published by Dragon Tree Press, it's perfect bound, and you've got a spine. Things that came out by Grimoire Games and the early publishing of grimoires by Emperor's Choice Games came out in a saddle stapled, so there's no writing on the spine, so like that. So what happened is Emperor's Choice Games decides they wanted to put together Arduin Bloody Arduin. So they start trying to generate interest in Arduin again, and this is about the year 2000. First thing they did is in 2002, they came out with the final of the grimoires, and it was called End War, and it wasn't written by Dave Hargrave. This is basically what Emperor's Choice Games were able to put together from the notes that they had at the time that had not yet been published. So that they did that first, and then they had a bunch of other material. They had a lot of people who played in Dave Hargrave's name, and they wanted to expand on the world of Arduin to generate interest in this new game system. So they did an insanely crazy thing. They published a setting book that's 800 pages long, and this is what I want to focus on in my series of brief videos. But this has just stuff, I don't know what it all has on it. It boggles my mind how much material is in here. So, and I've looked through it, and it does duplicate a lot of material that's in the grimoires, but I'm interested. I've never delved into the setting portion. I'm interested in magic items and bug people. So, at any rate, That came out in 2004. It came out originally in a hardbound version and then later softbound. So what happened to me is I had, through various through various machinations, got back into playing D&D. I never stopped playing D&D, but from the period of about 96 to maybe 97 to 2004, I was only gaming once a year. What happened is I came out of that, started running a 3rd edition game, and started rediscovering a lot of things that brought me joy in early D&D. And I was in Games of Berkeley, which is a really old store. It's been around forever. It's still Telegraph in Berkeley. And I stumbled across this book and picked it up. And I'm glad I did, because I haven't seen it anywhere else. It's really hard to find. And I was happy, really joyful to see that Arduin was still around. Probably didn't get my copy until about 2008, maybe. But that's what I like to focus my series of brief videos on. They came out with that at the same time. This was a non system. There's no crunch in here. There's a lot of flavor, but no crunch in here. No specific stats. At the same time, Monty St, who Emperor's Choice Games had working on the new version of Arduin, came out with the White Roc Inn, which is a dungeon based on Dave's notes. And I ran this at the time, I think. It's done according to Arduin Adventure rules, but they're fairly simple to convert over to D&D rules. At any rate, this came out, so they're trying to generate interest into people gaming in Arduin again. Then shortly after that, what Arduin Grimoire did is they continued publishing, or Emperor's Choice Games, they continued publishing the original trilogy in little digest softback saddle stitch books just like this. But what they did in 2005 is they republished all the later grimoires in this digest format. So perfect bound with spines. And then in 2006, so Dave Hargrave, in addition to publishing the grimoires, had always also published a series of dungeons. I think there were 4. And also some magic item cards and some monster cards and things like that, character sheets, all the typical stuff you'd see from a gaming company. So what Emperor's Choice Games did in 2006 is they published the Vaults of the Weaver. That was Dave Hargrave's nickname was Dreamweaver, or that was maybe a character of his. There's a Dreamweaver class, and it goes into the history of the setting. But this actually contains all the original dungeons with redrawn maps. They redid the maps to make them a little clearer and added some new artwork. Also, the Weaver is all done in the original trilogy rule set, so essentially original D&D. You don't see the same stats as you see in the Arduin Adventure. That was something, again, to generate interest in people playing in the Arduin setting again. All the while, Monty St is working on this new set of rules for Arduin, which they're still referring to as Arduin, Bloody Arduin. In 2008, my favorite Arduin book of all time came out. Emperor's Choice Games had a woman, her name, and I should mention it because I love her. I love what she put together. Becky Osheki. She took the original 3 Arduin grimoires and she collated them into a single book. Hardbound, the classes are together, all the races are together, all the monsters are together, all the information that you need to run Arduin in your standard OD&D style rule set or AD&D style rule set are contained in this book. In addition, they included the complete Arduin adventure in the book. So this is this is long out of print, but this is introducing to Dave's system of rules that he used and introduced in Arduin Adventure. Plus, they added a whole dungeon, Caliban Seat, which is most notorious Flying Dutchman dungeon is this dungeon called Caliban, which is this evil sentient tower that kind of floats around the multiverse and pops up in different places. And so what they included in here from Dave's notes were the area around Caliban. I love this book. If you can ever find this book, get it. As a comment, Emperor's Choice Games have gone silent. Their website is still live. They're not selling anything. You can order things and you can enter your credit card number, the last I heard, but nobody's has been charged or received anything. And so it would be nice if Emperor's Choice Games would publish this book again. This book is awesome, even if they did it in a hard softbound version. Those gamers out there, if you want to get something for Arduin, get this book. This is the one. If you can get one, get this. And interesting little tidbit, Greg Espinoza, who did this artwork, also did this artwork, and it supposedly is a continuation of the two scenes. Once the Emperor's Choice Games got done publishing the original material, they finally in 2010 came out with what was originally referred to as Arduin Bloody Arduin, and then ultimately was released as Arduin Eternal. And this book you can still find on Amazon, I believe, at cost. So somewhere in an Amazon warehouse, I think there still exist copies of these. Don't buy this Cultures book, because if you buy this new, this should come with it. This is the index to this. And what's in here is a completely new game system. As Dave Hargrave said, the numbers don't matter, only the ideas. So this is still a useful book if you want to introduce Arduin ideas into your campaign. And it is super comprehensive. And it does have the classes, the races, the magic items, spells, all that stuff. It's in here. You'll have to do some conversion. I've never played this system. I have seen comments of people who have, who said it's a hard to learn system, but satisfying once you get used to it. The following year, in 2011, and again, I believe you can still get these too, they released a full bestiary. Again, it's for the Arduin Eternal system. Now it can be expensive to get Arduin materials as time goes on when things aren't being produced. Expensive because once they go away, there's not going to be any more. So that's kind of sad. And then Emperor's Choice Games used to have a presence on Drive-Thru RPG where you could get a lot of materials in PDF format for really super inexpensive compared to buying vintage copies. But now their Drive-Thru RPG store has one free product. So I'm not sure what's going on with Emperor's Choice Games. I would hope that somebody in the future publishes some of the Arduin crunch, because that's what Arduin is known for. So the next step for me, back in my garage, is I want to go through this book here. I'd like to explore some of the Arduin setting, and I know a lot of the Arduin setting in terms of the history. Dave Hargrave published bits and pieces of the history all through the grimoires. There's the Elf-Human Wars. There's this subterranean cavern system. There's the whole history of how the Arduin country is governed, because it's this nexus point, plateau of forever, where you can get to all the planes. So that's what I think I'm going to go through. Thank you for bearing with me through this very informal garage style video, and I hope to have something coming up on the Arduin setting soon, and I'd be happy if you'd join me for taking a tour through that. It'll be a first time for both of us. So thanks, and I'll catch up with you soon.